2 days progress. We got out here, I started looking at that motor. It's definitely not going to fit in there with this motor mount the way it is. So I got this one cut off to see how hard it was going to be. That little Sawzall didn't like that much, but the way it looks, to get that baby to stab a motor mount on this side, it's got a blank spot. You'd have to drill it and tap it, and it's got like 3 spots. It's got 2 on the top, 1 on the bottom. You make a plate and you can stick that motor mount up there. I don't know, that's pretty tight on that side. You got the starter right there. So I definitely don't want to pull the motor out to put the starter in there. I mean, I can put it together the way it is, but once you put that motor mount in there, boy, I don't know. Lay down here and show you what I'm talking about. See, it's got a blank spot right there on the block. That flat spot right there. And then you got 3 holes. One's got that compressor, or that looks like some kind of mount, or it might be a knock sensor. Gotta be careful. Gotta look it up, make sure what it is. But you got all that, then you got the dipstick tube, and then you got the starter right there. So I'll figure 3 anchor points. If he was to drill at that blank right there, drill into it and tap it. That's not a big deal. I can hang it from the front just to make sure we're going to get it to fit until I can figure out a way to do that. And on this side, that'll definitely work. But if you look at it, see, it's even got a blank for another dipstick tube. Sometimes you got to do that on them. Like a different style motor. Sometimes they got them one side or the other. So you might actually just be able to buy a motor mount. I haven't looked. You know, it might have like a different style to where you can do a motor mount. I don't think these 2 got threads in them. I don't know if these do or not. Yeah, that one does. That one probably does too. But it's kind of like, it's deeper, if you know what I'm saying. This is deeper and that. But the way the motor mounted up, you know, it had 4 bolts in it. They were kind of low, below that, and then kind of high. So, on the donor, I was going to use the donor motor mounts because I've already got a motor mount. They're the same way on both sides, but it's got 4 mounting points. A little bit different motor. Little bit different style motor. But right here, you got the motor mount on the front of the motor, but if you look at it, it's got 2 bolts here. You can make a mount coming out of there any old way. I've got the other mount. I'll probably make a mount to where I can bolt it up there and bolt it up there. And then I might try to put 2 motor mounts on the side. Just, you know, if you get hit, you don't want to eat a motor. The way people drive down this road, saying they come down through 200 mile an hour. Not literally, but it's close. So, we get that much done. I got to get this other motor mount off. Don't have many tips left for the plasma cutter, so I got to see what we got to have in order. Might cut it, it might not. That's pretty thick. It's like, I don't know, you can see it there. It's kind of thick. Maybe 1/8 inch. Maybe a little bit more. But, oh boy, sit out the bolts. I got a tracking number today for my bolts. And once we do all that, man, you know, with the way that motor plate is and everything, I really don't want to have a motor mount to where it's going to be in the way of the starter. You know, if you're trying to put a starter on that thing, that's it. You probably won't be able to without taking and unhooking the motor mounts and jacking it off up to where you can get that motor mount unbolted from the block. And the way it is, you got that AC compressor in the way. Am I talking lazy? I might be, but to get it going, you know, we may have to do all that. It's just not going to be a right now thing, because I need room to the front of that motor for the electric fans. So that motor's got an electric fan, or did have. Those electric fans I got, I don't know if they'll be enough, but I'm going to try to make it work. The way I was looking at that, might just be able to throw an extra wiring harness in there for the motor and just run a hot to it and hook up the fuel pump, and probably going to have that inside wiring harness to start it. I mean, you could put a push button on it. It's starting to turn into a hot rod, so you might just have a push button hooked up to the starter. You know, just start it and make sure it's got power to the PCM. You know, I'm sure I could figure out, you know, enough to hook the relay up on the other wiring harness. I seen another guy that had another truck. He had a Colorado, but it had a small block in it. One of the newer style, had to get it tuned. He used 2 wiring harnesses, and even the aftermarket option was to leave your factory wiring harness, then it offered a wiring harness for the motor. And it was pretty right. He had it, and he's like, man, I got it. It's going good now. And that's what he was talking about. You know, it's not the truck. He said, man, those are some good-looking trucks. It's just the motor and the electrical problems. Because if you leave, the AC is going to bolt right up to that AC compressor, okay? So, I just need to kind of study the wiring harness enough to, I might be able to just hook up a power wire off of that key switch to where it's going to a relay. Instead of going to a relay on this, it'll go to a relay inside of that motor wiring harness. So you'd have to have the PCM hooked up and then have a signal wire going to your whatever. You got to have all that electric stuff. And what could happen would be the security. You know, some kind of security thing to where it don't want to let it start. So that might be the only problem. But I'm going to try to hook the wiring harness that goes into there. I'm going to have to pull the dash and just kind of lay it in there and put the instrument cluster in there. And it's got to be able to turn the fuel pump on. So you have to hook up the fuel pump. Just leave the headlight wiring harness off of it, basically. All that jazz. And then use my wiring harness to power the horn, the heat, the AC. It's got a low pressure switch, you know. You get all that to work. And then you got the instrument cluster in there. You'd have volts, fuel pump, and then everything might work except for the speedometer. Now, if we can hook up the speed sensor some way, somehow, it will work. So, that's the only thing. You're going to be deleting the ABS off of this. Once I get it all figured out, I can really take and de-pin everything and clean it all up and take whatever we're not going to use out of it. That way there's no problems with anything as far as, you know, don't need that wire, why is it here? Most of it's going to probably be like the airbag stuff. It'll be gone. You'll probably have to unhook all the airbag stuff in that one or whatever. I was going to try to use that dash and just put all that in there. I just don't think that's going to be right. And that steering column is definitely where the hole comes out is basically right there where the brake booster is. I started measuring it out, you know, too high, too low, you know, cut one high, cut one low. Sometimes it'll work, sometimes it won't. And in my case, I don't think it would work. You know, all that heat and air box is still good. You just need to be able to make it work. And once you put the dash on it, or put the dash in it, back in it, once you got that coming up through there, it's got a way to start it. So I'm thinking if you leave most of what you got on there, if you can get it to start without, you know, other than the wiring harness coming through there, you'd have the dash. It's got a key switch on it, but it's just, it's not much, but you don't want to cut the wires because you don't want it to go into security mode because you'll have to reflash it. It's got to have that key to reflash the computer. You got to turn it on, let the security light flash out, and then it'll start. It does it sometimes already, so it just needs that box hooked up to the wiring harness. So if we got the PCM to where the motor will run, and we can use our headlights, taillights. Now that body control module where it's bad, I have hooked those up in a derby car before. We just cut that thing out, and you can wire. You gotta have, it's 12 volts coming in, but you put a resistor on the fuel wire coming in to the gas pedal, and you knock it down to 5 volts, if that makes sense. It's just 5 volts, and it reads just like a fuel pump across that pedal. That's how that works. We'll be taking that fuel pedal out, but I had to burn a hole in there for the cable to come through so we can mount that fuel pedal up, and I'll have to have that hole. I got to have the holes for the wiring harness that'll be coming back in. So you'll have to, cut some big holes out and put something over it and tack weld it and seam seal it in and kind of spray paint it now. And hopefully it's not too much. But when you turn that, it'll have 2 keys basically. You have to have one key for the motor wiring harness, and then the key to unlock the steering column. It probably won't be much, but I'll have to have it to hook up the multifunction switch, unless I can power that block with my old fuse block. Be able to turn the fuel pump on. What happens with the security, it just turns the fuel pump off. So that's not a big deal. If I have to hook up a toggle switch to the fuel pump to turn the fuel pump on, so be it. And it's got a supply line and a return line on this style motor. So I could take the supply line and a return line, plug it up, and then have somebody make me a piece that'll go factory to factory. Or go from like a soft line that plugs up to my factory lines and plug up to these lines. Not a big deal. And then once we figure out, it'll start, it'll run, the headlights and taillights work. But what I was getting at with the headlights and taillights on that body control module, you can just cut the wires and splice the wires in to where the taillights will work, third brake light, back brake lights. I've had to do that on body control modules before. You just cut that out. If it's got 12 volts, it just goes through that box and it starts messing up because it's got corrosion or whatever. We've cut them out and just splice them together. So I have done it in the past, let's put it to you like that, to make it work. We had an old junk car, it was some kind of class he was running. He's like, man, the body control module's messed up. I'm not going to do that because it can't get the taillights, headlights, and all that to work. You bring it, make it, it's got to have headlights, taillights, turn signals, and brake lights, like a factory style car that were crashing out. They painted it up and everything, it looked nice. But what we had to do is just cut the wires coming into the body control module and bypass all the silliness. It makes it to where they don't work for whatever reason. But we had to have headlights and taillights. Eventually what we did was we just bought a $20 wiring harness, put power to it, make the headlights, taillights, and turn signals work. That way you can take it out of one, put it in another one. Simplify the problem. Instead of having to chase all the wires down, you can just get a power probe or like an ohm meter. That wire here, beep, beep, and then you beep, beep, and you find your wires without a wiring schematic. You just splice them together. It's easier just to get another wiring harness and just hook it up to where headlights, taillights, turn signal, horn, all that had to work for what he was doing. They gut them out, they do a lot. And then he painted it up, and he said that was easier, and the horn had to work. So you could have a horn button, but they still had to gut it out, do all that jazz. It had to have a fuel tank in the car to where it couldn't get punctured, and fuel safety shut-off switch and all that jazz for like and the sidebar and paint the door white. Other than that, it had a real nice paint job. They painted it up, slicked it up, and it was like a factory style class, and they crash them out. You just find something with a really nice something, whatever, and just put like a motor in it with a carburetor and whatever, but the headlights and taillights and all that had to work. So I have done that. And then with that guy having to take that motor and have two wire, that was just like something to make the motor run. That's basically all we need. If you can start that motor and the alternator will charge the battery and it'll kick on, you know, if I do like a electric fan, probably had to put an electric fan on it and just get some motor mounts. That plate's going to be pretty tough. You know, you're bolting the motor to the plate and then the plate bolts to the transmission. That's a pretty good motor mount in itself. And then, you know, the way they had that, they had it mounted up to where that transmission had most of the motor mounts on it. But that was to keep it solid. You know, I'm definitely want 2 motor mounts on the side of the motor. If we got to drill that blank hole out and tap it and then make a bracket with just 3 bolts, and then it has that factory mount with the factory Colorado, whatever. That way we can take that front mount completely off of that motor. Clean that front up. You know, so we got plenty of room for the electric fan or electric fans, however we got to do it. And then it'll have a 12-volt key on power supply. I had a truck one time. I had an electric fan on, body dropped. And, like if you just put it directly to the battery, it get hot out in the sun and kick the fans on. You know, so you had to be careful. Basically. But, you know, that's the way I did that. To use the factory wiring harness, like for the headlights and all that. If we have to get another wiring harness, they're not bad. I mean, basically, I just want headlights, taillights, key on for the power to fuel pump. I mean, you can get a little small something to make all that work. You just got to undo the pins and then either put a pin on it or just butt connect it in. It's not that big a job. But you got to have enough circuits to run the AC. You got to turn on the low pressure switch and turn on the AC compressor. I want the AC to work and the heat to work, but I want to use the factory everything inside the truck, and we just got to make the motor run, and then we'll have to figure out something with the transmission. You know, you can get a transmission thing, but it'll have like a wire. It's got to work off of a wire to know how much gas you're giving it to make it shift right. Or you can do the toggle switches. It might be toggle switches, and then you'll have to do something with the 4-wheel drive. You know, the 4-wheel drive just got a hot in the ground. You throw the hot in the ground to that ram, it'll push it out to make the 4-wheel drive hubs lock in, and then you can shift the transfer case with the cable style shift. I found one, decent price. That's reasonable. And then the transmission, I'm thinking a manual valve body. You know, you shift it 4-speed, and it'll have overdrive, so it'll have to have a button in it, just like the full-size trucks. You got a button inside of that right there. You just push the button and have a light on it to let you know that the overdrive is turned on. It's turning into a little hot rod. That's basically what you got to have to make what you got work. It sucks to do that, but if you can't get something that's, you know, overly complicated to work, you simplify it. That's my opinion. It's a lot to do, but if that's what it takes, this is still a pretty decent truck. I just want to be able to drive this stupid thing, you know. Paying taxes on it, so. Not like Ohio, you pay it one time, and if you want to drive it, you just pay the registration. You know, it taxes every single year, so I owe some taxes on it right now. I got to get that caught up, and then hopefully we can get this thing to where we can enjoy it. You know, just enjoy it for what it is. It's an old truck, and you know, I like to go fishing, but I like to have my truck to where I can stick my stuff in the bed, and you don't have to smell it if it, you know, have it in the cab. That goes with your fishing gear too. So we're going to keep plugging. I do know that sometimes, like the injectors and stuff like that, if that security mode don't work, it won't power the injectors. So we're going to try to take 2 and make 1. That's the game plan. I got to get out here tomorrow. It's getting late. It's almost dark again. I got to clean up. Didn't want to burn that Sawzall up. It ain't much. And it's not like a DeWalt Sawzall. But one piece at a time, we'll figure it out. You know, I've been reading up. I'm tired. I'm reading all the wiring diagrams, schematics, whatever. I was like, blah, blah, blah. You know, trying to look at the wiring harness, how it worked. But I do remember we took and just cut the body control module out of a few of them. Basically, it does something with the throttle body and the gas pedal. We don't want all that crap. We're going to make it run off of manual style throttle body. We just want the headlights, taillights, third brake light, turn signals, and the horn to work with what we got. Leave the multi-function switch in it to where all that works, even if we have to put another little cheap wiring harness on it. Heat, AC, the push button four-wheel drive should work. You put power to it, it should push that ram out. But to get the transfer case to shift, that might be something where it's got that electric box on it if it gets wet. And it's had problems in it before. I've put it in just drove it up on a hill, went through a little mud hole to go up to a flat spot and hang out for the night. It got wet, it didn't want to come out four-wheel drive. Let it set for a day, it dried up, it worked. So, it's just a little adapter plate that goes in there and it just meshes with the gears and something manual like a cable. You stick it in there, it will go. You just got to power up the ram, the actuator, to push the hubs in to engage the hubs. I would like to have a manual one of those. Just have it to where you can screw it in and have a plug to where you can just whatever. You can just screw that baby in there and be done with it. Engage the hubs all the time. It won't hurt them. I put 100,000 miles on a truck one time. I mean, you drive it that much, you've done something. So